So how can analytics help to identify toxic leaders? Well, when I started this business 7 years ago to measure and track growth in our leadership programs, we found that we wanted to measure that, so we could develop this proprietary tool called leadership impact assessment. And we were using that for just basically for helping people understand what the leadership behaviors were. Help them understand, who they were as a leader and, how that impacted people around them. And as over time, we started collecting these responses, and we found that, there's a lot of information in there. And, especially looking at, comparing people to a population average, because if you have enough data, we can say, okay, so now I've done Brian's initial evaluation. How does he compare to the rest of the population? And that's very insightful for the leader. Then a couple of years ago, we found distinct differences at the organization level. It was amazing when we put them out by, the C-level executives, vice presidents, directors, and so forth, and got a lot of, interesting insights. So now this has become a core piece of our leadership resources management solution. We look at individual gaps, like we were doing for the longest time since we started it. Now we look at team gaps, where we can look at, finding gaps between the leader's perception of their leadership and their team's perception of their leadership. That's where we do like 360 and that's how we find the toxic leaders. Because usually you have a toxic leader, their perception of their leadership is going to be way outside the norm. And their team is going to say, well, you're really down here. And then you say, oh, wow, that's interesting. So we use that for that. And then, in organization level, we can look at, the different like organization level, look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, programs, and putting aside tiers for finding who your best leaders are so you can make sure you keep them. So the whole tool is based on leadership behavior using a 7-point Likert scale. So it's really easy to do. Most people can do it pretty quickly, but there's a lot of, we have some good questions that ask people, separates the good leaders from the great leaders. So then we match the population response to the population average, to the team assessment, and we have minimum requirements too. Unlike we're talking about, where you have, people can know who wrote it, where we have minimums like, you have to have at least 4 people doing the evaluating you. That way you can minimize any type of retaliation.